logic things, I'm sure there's something that I've just been kind of overwhelmed at just getting it normalized to what we have. But now trying to get more interface. Hello, everybody. We got the green light. That means we're live. Well, welcome to the Bible study. We are continuing our Bible study looking at Joseph and the character of it and going through it. We've been quite a few. This is the sixth class actually going through it. It is one of the biggest character stories in the Bible, and I think there's a very meaningful reason for that because of the lessons that we draw from it. And there are just so many that, even I try to not leave lessons hanging by themselves. And so if somebody's watching this in the future, they have a continuity between the lessons, and we got 6 of them now. So trying to keep that flow going. And how many classes do we keep going with this? So last week, what we did do is I tried to look at the idea of once he came to power, and when he came to power, how he managed the famine. In order to do that, I had to jump out to chapter 47 and show the totality of the way that Joseph was managing the famine and how Egypt, the impact on Egypt, and how that the change of the government, the change of the structure of the relationship between Pharaoh and the people. So what we have is him being initiated into the role, and when he does this, he's basically told, run the program, you got it, you take care of every inch of it. And as they do so, the first 7 years, they're bumper crops, and he takes a fifth, which would be 20% above. So if they already have, if their normal crop production was this level, now they're getting much more, they're taking 20%. It would not, if you think about it, they would still, even the individuals would have a good crop that year. So it's not like those 7 years that, Joseph is taking that 1/5, 20% from all of them, that it was dipping down. And so when they kick into the bad years, the famine, they're already in a deficit because they've been taken from them. No, remember, these are abundant years, mass production. So that 20% that Pharaoh is now collecting through Joseph is not going to have as much. They would still have some reserve as well. However they manage it, we don't really know. But I can imagine that they weren't ignorant in the fact that, life is seasonal and every year is a guess. You don't know. They didn't have weather satellites. They didn't know about El Niños and, how the weather was going to be next year, or almanacs but it was intuitive. So they had to be able to know that this year was good, the next year could be horrible, the next 5 years could be great, the next 5 years could be bad. So to balance and feed your family, you wouldn't eat everything that you produced that year. What I'm getting at, you would know that as a family, kind of like your life savings, you would have some reserve food. So during this bumper crop, why I'm saying this is because it's important to understand when the famine hits, when we talk about this and how it triggers the release of the grain storages from the house of Pharaoh, we need to understand the people had a good crop. They were having great production as well. So when he does this, it's something that is never been done before. It's something extremely unique. And to give this Hebrew, Semitic, they would call him a Semitic, power like this, had to create, some tension among those in the household and the government of Pharaoh. But he's being successful. He's being productive, and everything is happening according to the vision, the dreams that he interpreted, which is also a testimony. I want to keep saying this. All of this happening is an amazing testimony about God, Yahweh, to all people, all mankind that are living and watching this happen before their eyes. Because, the first time that a guy showed up at your farm in Egypt and said, Pharaoh's now going to take a fifth of it. Why? Why are you going to now take a fifth of my stuff? Well, the Pharaoh had a dream. So, that dream showed that we're going to have 7 years of abundance and 7 years of famine. And so Pharaoh took this Semitic and put him in charge, and now he's managing it, and he says we should take a fifth of everybody and store it up. Oh, okay. So you see how everybody in Egypt would start to be aware of this management program and who initiated it. Where did it come from? From a Semitic? This young man? And so as it's being fulfilled, it's a testimony of the truthfulness of his God over the Egyptian gods. And that's one of the great underpinning stories of all of this with Joseph as well, that we see this evidence of God being true, and that what was their God's track record? Well, they're idols. There were nothing, right? Yeah, they're nothing. So now you have a guy that says, oh, I've got a God. Oh, great, another God. Well, we already got 5 Egyptian gods. We got 4 Canaanite gods. And now you come as a Semitic and see there's a Yahweh God. And all of a sudden, this Yahweh God, though, that guy, it's happening. This would be the first God for many of them to see actually doing something, fulfilling something. So he puts him into that position of power. There's nobody greater. What an amazing relationship. And God providentially, again, it's providential. In other words, God isn't whispering in Joseph's ear and saying how to do things in this, but God is working through his Spirit, however he does. We find a very critical piece of information about his age, 30. When we first met him, when he was back at home, we got an age of 17. So we're getting an idea how many years has he been in captivity? I can't hear you. You got to talk loud. Remember, huh? 13 years. That's the start of it. So now we're going to have 6 years. He's married. Remember, he married the priest's daughter of On. He has 2 sons. And remember, it said in the 6th year of abundance. So that makes him 36. So he's going to be 37 when the drought hits and the famine occurs. So now we're looking at, he's going to be nearly 38 years old before he comes into contact with his brothers. Again, I think an important thing is the names of his sons mean something to him. And they're not just blaspheming God. But they're an expression of an emotional, psychological thought, the way he feels about what his life has done and represents. Many of our children are kind of named that. People name their children. There's, sometimes about something significant of meaning to them. But look at Manasseh. God has made me forget all my hardships and my father's house. To forget it. Now remember, I'm going to bring this up. I keep bringing this up. But remember when he traveled the land of Egypt? We read that. Why didn't he go home? We're not told. We have no idea. I cannot tell you biblically by Scripture why he didn't go home. But it has to make you wonder. If you have 6 years of abundance and once you got things going, why couldn't you go at year 6 when things are rolling smoothly, and then while it's still good and go see your parents and square up? Either get revenge, right? You could go home and take a few of the army of Pharaoh, get a little revenge, pay a little visit to those brothers, but he does nothing. But in year 6, what does he name his children? Forgets my father's house. But God, you notice he's pointing the glory to God, and he's kind of minimizing the impact of what his family effect has had on him. And honestly, that's a very good lesson for us today, isn't it? That really it's more about our relationship with God and what he's doing for us and focusing on that, and not necessarily our family or our relationships and the negativity that may impose upon us and change our lives' directions. Ephraim, God has made me fruitful in my land of what? Affliction. He never turns it into a land of blessing. He never, he always sees this as a land of affliction. Because think about it, even at this age, he still spent more years suffering than years in a position of power. Going from a dungeon to second in power. He's got a lot of psychological memories of being a prisoner, being accused of rape and all of that. So this land to him has been very painful. But God has turned that around. See that? God has done this for him. God has helped him in his memory psychologically of being able to put into check and forget about the hardship and his family problems. God has helped me to become fruitful in this place where I'm being afflicted. Those are two great sermons right there you could think about. So it's very, very good. 41, 49, we see where he gathered very much grain. Depends on what translation, but basically, as you describe the sand of the sea, until he stopped counting. And I just can't imagine. I showed some archaeological photos last week, so if you want to see those and you're watching tonight or later on, you can go back and look at some of the, or Google it, the grain storage rooms and the processing, the way they had it set up, where people would come through these little booths, and then they would go on through, they get a ticket, they go down below, and they had a system of where these massive grain silos would then dump into their bags, and then they would go on out the bottom. So they kind of like a one-way little trip all the way through it. And they found that. So even that process as well was something, but the tremendous amount of grain. Now again, this is just the grain he collected. This is not all the grain in Egypt. Everybody still was farming and living normal routine. So they were also, they had an abundance on top of all of this that now he has gathered. So then when it hits, we're jumping into 55. So when the land of Egypt was famished and the people cried to Pharaoh for bread, then Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph. Whatever he says to you, do. He has no complaints or no problem at all, no qualms, as we would say, about anything Joseph is doing, the way he's handling it. That's a lot of trust, a tremendous amount of trust. And again, he's not Egyptian, so he's allowing him, which is important when we look at the way, the fairness. We talked about this idea of the way that he engages the people as the famine destroys their lives, and how they keep running out of grain, and how they keep coming to him and asking him, you know, okay, we're out of grain, we're out of money, we can't, first years, they're going to eat what they've got, their abundance. Then into the second year or so, they're going to be needing grain, so what are they going to do? They come to Joseph. Joseph then sells them grain. Then they run out of money, and they're like, okay, we're out of money, so let us sell our livestock to you. And Joseph says, okay. Now remember, they're the ones, the people are the ones that are suggesting the solution, and Joseph's saying, okay. And remember, taking the livestock off their hands was a blessing because now you're not having to feed them all that grain and all that food. And now Pharaoh has to, right? Pharaoh's house has to, but he's got the abundance. So he's able to keep the livestock alive. Then they run out and get to the point where it's like, you know what, we'll sell our land and we will be indentured servants to you. And Joseph says, okay. And he turns around and does something amazing. He pretty much gives the land back to them to live on, to farm, gives them seed. And I think, John, you'd pointed out the fact that, you know, it does no good if it's still a famine. You got a bag of seed over here, but why put it out? So this has to be something that's looking toward the very end of the famine. And that's, again, we're jumped to chapter 47, so I'm kind of rehashing the total management of this. But so eventually they're going to be able to use that seed, and then whatever they produce, 80% of it's going to become theirs. And he's just going to continue the same process that he had before the drought of collecting a fifth for the house of Pharaoh. And so the people themselves, remember that verse, the people themselves say, you have saved our lives. They didn't come back and go, oh, we're now indentured servants. We're so horrible. It's so harsh. You're so mean. You're just cruel. We want our freedom. We want our... So what I'm saying is the way they initiated this, the way that it was executed, and the result of it was something very blessed and good for all people. So some people, I've read some criticism saying, there's communism, there's socialism, you know, and he's implementing, no. The people are the ones initiating this, and usually in modern applications, it's a forced issue from some dictator down on the people. We're going to take your land. We're going to take half your stuff. This is completely the opposite, so it's not the same. But it does impact the structure of pharaohs from this day forward, and gives the pharaoh's organization, or government, I guess you call it, a stability that apparently it never had before. And there is historical documentation of pharaohs, this one pharaoh, that had implemented these radical changes, and it was out of the norm. And so a lot of people point to that is probably the pharaoh that when Joseph was there, because it's still hard to tie those together. So it goes beyond Egypt. Now, I did propose the idea that some have said that this famine could be flood-induced. It could wipe them out, but not everyone in Canaan is necessarily living by rivers and growing their crops by rivers and such. So it wouldn't necessarily mean that everybody that's being affected in that whole large region is just flooding, but we know that we've seen this in our country just recently. Just look at our weather. We've gone from floodings in California, Lake Mead, almost at 70-80%. California now is out of a drought. Their lakes are averaging 80% fill. Last summer, where were they at? 35%. They're at 85% that fast. There's flooding going on. But Louisiana was burning. They were drought. So you can see where, okay, even if, so my argument is that, yes, it could be a flood-induced drought in one area, and at the same time could be no water and kind of a lack of rain killing crops. That's my point. Okay, I'll move on. So it forces all the countries around that region to come and to buy grain. This is something where, there had to be a little bit of a conversation between Pharaoh and Joseph saying, now this program was for Egypt. We collected from Egyptians. We stored this in the house of Pharaoh so that we could then endure those 7 years for Egypt. But at some point, this becomes an international program, right? Now, if you're a cruel leader, you would want to weaken those nations around you. That would be and I'm speaking sarcastically, but I'm saying if you were wanting to dominate the world, this is the time to do it. Let them starve. We have our money, we have our food, we're feeding our people, we're prospering, and so we're just going to let the rest of those countries, our enemies that we don't like, to suffer and dwindle down, become weak, and then I can then invade. You don't even see any of that, do you? It's not there. It's automatically that the benevolence of this Pharaoh that's allowing Joseph's benevolence as a blessing. Okay, another point here. Think about the big plan. Okay, let's jump back to the big theme of the Bible. It's to bring the Messiah. In that, we know all these prophecies. Jump to Abraham. We know there's one that says that his people are going to go off to Egypt for 430 years. Big plan picture here, I'm telling you, right? But every time if you go through, you look at this, you will see how all people end up being blessed. If you were to go back and even look at Abraham, the people and the kings around him that interacted with him ended up receiving some blessing from Abraham. And you remember when just go through and you can see this happening, where God is working his plan to fulfill an ultimate goal of bringing the Messiah. And yet at the same time, no matter how this plan goes and this journey travels, all people are receiving some blessings. And through that, those blessings that all the world is looking at, like I just described, is a testimony of the one true God. It's touching people's lives. And it's given an evidence and a witness to this God, which then, honestly, helps to prepare the ultimate, was to bring the gospel on around. So here we have these countries that are also starving, that are now receiving a blessing because of God. Now they're going to be able to survive. So these are some of those really deep thoughts when we start looking at this huge story about this young man who gets sold off into slavery, gets accused of rape, goes into jail, rises up to power, and we get distracted with all that, and we forget about these beautiful things God is working around. And we're going to see how he's going to work on Jacob and his family as well. So as we continue, we see that this famine, of course, hits Canaan, where Jacob and his household is, and it's fixing to make a full circle, right? We're going to come back and we see this reunion happen. And so we're going to pick up in chapter 42, verses 1 through 3. When Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Indeed, I have heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down to that place and buy for us there, that we may live and not die." So Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. You notice that's a very interesting phrase, the way he says, "Why are you looking at each other?" Now think, when I had to think about this as a father, and when my boys were like in middle school and high school, and I would be talking to them, and they'd start giving themselves a look. And I'm sitting there looking at them going, "Why are you looking at each other? What's going on?" I would say, "I want you guys to go and do something or do that." And they're sitting there looking or giggling or looking at each other, and there's like an inside something going on. This is what's happening. So they're discussing. See, now we don't have a manuscript, somebody sitting there, the whole thing. But this is a conversation that has been discussed and going, we're starving, but I'm hearing Egypt and talking about it. And then all of a sudden now, it's like in this conversation about how are we going to survive? How do we make it through this? We're running out. We waited as long. The weather's not coming back. It's not working, guys. What are we going to do? Well, I hear there's grain in Egypt. And the brother's like,
Yeah, I hope he doesn't send me.
What do you think they're doing?
They're remembering group.
Well, they don't know where he went to, right? They only sold him to Potiphar, and they didn't know his whereabouts. Right?
They have no idea. But they know he went to Egypt.
Yeah.
They know he got sold as a slave, and they know that caravan was going to Egypt. That's it.
So I said they were saying, "Oh boy, I hope he doesn't choose me. Oh, I hope he chooses you."
And they must have heard that it's like an Hebrew slave that saved Egypt. Something like that. The information might have gone around that the person that helped Egypt to...
It's possible.
Yeah, is like
And
one
who's
of
in
the...
charge now?
Right, something like that, probably.
It's very, it's very possible, but, if you look at the transformation of Joseph, even like when he came before Pharaoh, he was speaking Egyptian. He had already started to transform himself, dress, and so by this time, it's possible that they just know that there's some guy that is running this program, and that it's different. There's something about it that they're able to. How are they doing it? That would be the other conversation. Why do they have green and we don't? Right? But part of that deeper conversation is as you see the brothers of Jacob sitting around going, well, what? Wait a minute. Why do they have green? How are they able to get through this? Oh, you didn't hear? There was a caravan come through and they told us there's this guy that's running the program there. Oh, really? Tell us about what's going on. Yeah, you know what he did? He had this dream, and so we don't know. That's real speculation because it's not in the scripture. But caravans did travel, they did talk, but I don't know how much his race or his origin of who this guy in charge was been revealed. I don't think they would have necessarily been close enough to be able to the common guy who's just getting grain and traveling in caravans, but they would absolutely be able to articulate the fact that there is this guy that has been given power and he is running everything in Egypt.
Well, I think they would know that it wasn't Pharaoh anymore.
Yeah, that there's another person that has a tremendous amount of power. And maybe it is. We don't know. But whatever, even if let's just say they don't know. They did know when they pulled that brother of theirs out. They sold him to a caravan that was going to Egypt to sell stuff. So Egypt and Joseph. And dad's now saying, do what? Go to Egypt.
Do you think maybe they could have thought back to what Joseph said to them before he left?
I don't think so. No, not yet. Not yet. Because Joseph doesn't. We're going to see when it dawns on him. We're going to see. Even Joseph isn't quite there yet. But I guarantee you, they have a conscience that every time I bet you the word Egypt came up, even before this date, they all were thinking about where their little brother went and who sent them there. Now, if you look at the lifespan of some slaves, 10 years was a good time. Some of them, if they could live 10 years, he's 17. So it's over 10 years. So there may be some thought that they're kind of hoping he's dead. Because if we go there, we're going to have to, what are you going to, but then that's a horrible thought as a brother, isn't it? Isn't there a part of all brothers that go, yeah, I'd like to really reconcile and make up and ask for forgiveness? And then there's that fear of going, I don't think I want to see him. I hope we can get down there and get out of there clean. Because I am guilty. And I don't want to see the results of what I've done to my brother. What if my brother is this broken man now that's got scars and he's got one leg because of all these horrific things that have happened to him, and it's because I was selfish and sold him off. So there's a part that you want to sear that conscience, but you can't. These brothers can't do that. That's why I love the way that it says, and they were looking around. What are you guys looking at? And Jacob's like, what are you guys looking at? Go. Now, they don't refuse, but he's sending them all. You notice he sends them in numbers of safety. It's a security issue. He's never going to send one. That would be dangerous. Especially the amount of money he's going to send with him. He's not going to go down and buy a month's worth of grain. It's going to take him close to a month to get there. So he's taking thousands of dollars using our term money-wise. Thousands and thousands. Some say it could have been up to $10,000 worth of money or whatever it was at that time, commodity that they would use in order to secure enough grain to make it an extended period as much as they could haul back and buy. And he was a rich man. It wasn't like he was going to have to go get a loan and say, we got to go get a loan, I don't have enough money. No, he had the means, Jacob. So they're going down there with the intent of purchasing a large quantity of grain to sustain them, hopefully, through the rest of the famine. So at least I'm saying a year's worth of grain. And this ain't a small family, is it? By this time, he's got servants, he's got 4 women, wives, and others, and plus all the children, 10 children that are there. So he's got to buy a lot of grain. So they're not going to send one. And they're going to send a lot of mules or camels, I don't know which animal they were using, camels, to haul this back. And they're going to need to manage those mules. Then they're going to have to take food. They're going to have to take food to sustain themselves and the caravan, the mini caravan that they're going to travel down there. So, but this is where we start to see a little bit of the emotional side. That Jacob is still hurting from Joseph. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother with his brothers, for he said, lest some calamity befall him. It's not, just travel alone. It wasn't necessarily a safest means. Camel could fall on you. You could fall off and break your neck. They didn't have all the safety and OSHA regulations, and you got to wear a helmet when you're on your camel. You got to make sure you got knee pads. You got to make sure. No, there was a lot of things that could happen to people and did happen while they were journeying. And he's also just being overprotected. But you notice the connection. Joseph and Benjamin, they're the one. What do they share in common?
Rebecca, the mom.
Rebecca, the mom. It's interesting how the way it says, he did not send Joseph's brother. Well, he's their brothers too. He didn't say Jacob did not send their younger brother Benjamin, because he is. He's his half brother, but he didn't say it like they're an integral part. Jacob is seeing a different, very special relationship, and he's still holding on to it. And now he's transferring that to Benjamin and his fear of losing him. So the grief is still there. He still has no idea. Now, remember, what does Jacob's name mean? It means one who supplants, one who deceives. Jacob has been one of the greatest ones to do this deceptiveness, and it's kind of an interesting aspect here how this long-term kind of deception has been going on for 13 years and longer. That you see this going on, that he's been living under this deception that his son's dead. And it's still going on. And so I don't know what God's doing, but God is working something with Jacob as well. Jacob's not just on the outside of this story. And none of the boys are either, those 10 especially. So he has that. So now, when they come there, we see in 42 verse 6, now Joseph was the governor over the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brother came, and they bowed down before him with their faces toward the earth. Right away, Moses, as he's recording this with the guidance of the Holy Spirit, is very clearly saying, you guys remember that dream I told you about, that we wrote about earlier? But one of the ideas is that look at the control and power of everyone is coming to Joseph. Now, this is kind of because of the way it's recorded, and the point is not to show his daily schedule, Joseph. In other words, at 8:05 he woke up, 8:30 he ate breakfast, 9:02 he was down at the office, at 10 o'clock he started receiving people and approving them of grain, and then at 10:11 he took 11. It's not a daily type of thing that he went through. The point is, he was the one who had the final say-so. There were people under him that's processing. There's too many people coming. You can imagine the caravan coming from all these nations. But what do you think Joseph's thinking? Have you ever thought for a moment that he had to think, this is famine's hitting my family. I don't know where what's going on back there, but I know they're not escaping this famine either. So during these years, especially once the famine hit, and he's sitting there seeing all these people come in from all these different nations, had to be sitting there going,
Well,
I think
the brothers aren't coming back to reconcile. He's hearing that they have the famine over there in Canaan too. So
he knows they got to show up. He knows they got to show up. He knows his daddy's resources. He probably is very aware that they're starving. They're just as in trouble as everybody else. So I think he was on the alert. He was looking to see. And so when he saw them, then he injects. Because otherwise, is he going to stand there and clear every person from every nation that comes through? That'd be like sitting down at the port of entry or the truck stop and clearing every truck that comes through and checking out every driver and making sure. So that's why I think that the narrative here is trying to not go through all this detail, but I think common sense would be emotionally, he knows the famine's hurting his family, the only place they're going to get grain is like everybody else, and it's here. And so he's going to be on the alert. He may have even told people, hey, look for some Semitics that'll be traveling here. I want to know about every Semitic that hits town with a caravan trying to buy grain. As soon as they're in town. Now, all of this is kind of presumptuous, but I think it's fairly sound to think. He's got some emotional baggage, doesn't he, that he's got to deal with. So can you imagine? So I think that he was able to position himself to where he was in front of his brothers, to where then this encounter occurs. Because, how long would it take if everybody went to Walmart, had to bow down before the greeter? Can I come in? Okay, next. Can I come in? Next. I mean, so I don't know. I may be completely wrong, but I think somehow Joseph was able to put himself in a position to where he could be there to greet these men and see what occurs. And what do? They come and bow down. And so in verse 7, he says, Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as if he was a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. Then he said to them, where do you come from? And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. So the first thing is, look at this. He recognizes them and he has an emotional response. But he has self-control, doesn't he?
It's called displacement in mental health.
What's that?
You call it displacement of emotion.
Yes.
In mental health. So you're trying to like cover up something, push it different.
And that's why I think it shows an incredible amount of self-control and discipline and thinking, shrewdness. We already know he's a sharp kid, man. I should say, by this time. And I am sure that he has thought about a reunion at some point in his life with his family. He may not have anticipated exactly the way it was going to be, especially once he got out of that prison and once he became where the position he was in, that someday there needed to be a reconciliation, and think to himself, what am I going to do? But so that's why I see this spoke roughly. It's like that, like you're saying, that displacement, not wanting to reach out and just, or have the soldiers just abuse him right there. But he's going to mess with them. And he's messing with them, but it's not an evil shrewdness what he's doing. It's actually very fitting, and it's very kind. Like I said, there's a lot of options. This could have gone down, right? A lot of ways this could have went down. As soon as he saw him, arrest him, throw him into the prison, leave him in darkness for a while, bring him up, beat him, throw him in the dungeon, bring him back up, beat him, execute him. I mean, there's a lot of different ways this could have went. So again, it shows, I think, some meekness and some spiritual gentleness to a degree that he's speaking roughly to them. And then he starts, and there's a part where he's wanting to remain concealed. He doesn't want to expose who he is yet. So he has to play this game of kind of being ignorant about who they are. And then he's going to manipulate. He's going to manipulate and try to see where he's going to go with it. I don't think decisively he's got a decisive direction or end game on this. I think he wants that encounter. He's going to take control, but I think there's a part that this is rolling out and happening. And he's kind of responding with it as it goes, as he's gaining information. Remember, as far as he knows, his father, has given up on him. He's either assumed he's dead, that he doesn't exist anymore. His father could be dead. His dad was an old man, remember? Where's his little brother? What's going on back home? If you've been hating on me because of my mom, what have you done to Benjamin? If you were capable and you were successful in removing me, what did you do to my little brother? Because I know my little brother would have been as loved as I was with my father because of our mother. So there's a lot of things that he's going to want to know what's going on. And it's fair. It is. I mean, but he's asking them. So they tell him where we're coming from. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them. So that's what I mean, Gary, you said, do you think they remembered that as they were going to Egypt? But I see we're here. That's what I mean about how this is all kind of coming out with him, all kind of coming together as he's starting to put this together instead of going right to vengeance or a certain way. His interaction is evolving on the fly, I guess you would say. And then as his anger's in check, he's talking rough to them, and then he sees them bowing down before him, and he goes, oh. Where'd the dream?
The brothers don't know who they're bowing down to, so they don't remember.
They don't know it yet, huh?
They're not even correlating the dream to Joseph. Joseph.
Now think about Joseph's life to this point, every time he's had a dream, he's been able to interpret it. But we never hear about God telling him about that first dream and interpreting to him. Clearly, him knowing. He never got a notice while he's in prison. Hey, Jacob, I've been interpreting these dreams for you, but let me tell you about the two you had back at home, and that means your brothers are going to come to Egypt, and they're going to bow down before you, and they're going to... Basically, the dreams, you'd walk away, he would go, I'm going to be prominent, and they're not. I mean, that's kind of the gist of it. So all those years, that's what he's kind of perceived. And then look at the years of humiliation and removal from it, and how that dream would have slowly got minimized. But then he has a confidence in knowing that the dreams of the baker, the cupbearer, and then the Pharaoh, that he's been able to have that interpretation. And now he's seeing the answer. God is showing him. There it is, right there. This is providential. This is something that I think God is making sure that he sees right before him, so he understands it. And this is one that's going to change a little bit of the course, I think, of the way he then treats them as well. These are things and interactions that are starting to shape his direction. So he says, you're spies. Now, when it says come to see the nakedness, it's talking about weaknesses in our country, our security. Can I break into the silos? Can we come in and rob the place? Can we, what is weak about Egypt? And is there a flaw in the program? Can I get past the security? All sorts of things. You're just trying to take advantage. That's all you're about. And they said to him, no, my Lord. Notice that? Isn't that cool? They're calling him my Lord. You can feel, I don't know about you, I can feel the emotions building up to a crescendo. And even though the brothers don't realize it, they as well. It started when they were looking at each other when Dad was talking about Egypt. And it didn't stop there. Remember, it took a long time to travel to Egypt. What do you think some conversations by the campfire was about? What do you think happened to Joseph, Reuben? Judah would go, I don't know. We didn't kill him, I know. Do you think he's still alive?
I think they're wondering why Jacob didn't send Benjamin.
Who? The brothers?
Yeah.
Oh, they knew. No, they told him. They said, I'm not sending him because I don't want him to die. I don't want him to...
Well, I know, but they are true brothers.
Oh, you're saying that Joseph, wondering why they didn't bring Benjamin?
Well, he is. I mean, that's what it says. I mean, how many brothers, how many do you have left at home? He said the father and the youngest one. But I'm wondering, the 10 brothers, they're going, why didn't they send Benjamin too? I mean, why just us? Why us 10? I mean, 10's a lot of brothers.
Well, Jacob told him, I'm not sending Benjamin with you because I don't want him to die. I'm missing your point. I don't understand what you're saying then. So what do you...
I'm saying the 10 brothers are saying, why us 10? Joseph gone. I mean, Joseph's gone, and Dad's leaving Benjamin at home. But us 10? I mean, does he not care if we die?
Yeah.
Sounds like he cares if Benjamin dies.
They knew that. That was the reason they sold Joseph. You remember I asked the question when we were in that chapter? I mean, like, Jacob shows it to them, like, I love these two more than you. I don't like your mom. I hate your mom.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like anything about you guys. These two guys I care for.
Mm-hmm.
He declares it to them. So it's kind of not new to them. They were used to that kind of life already. Like, my dad wouldn't send Benjamin if just we. I mean, it doesn't
But
care about
I
us.
think it would reinforce that anger, again, of showing the partiality, right? That here you are, we're talking about kind of some of the conversations as they journey down there. So on top of talking about Joseph, they would also be sitting there talking about, yeah, where's Benjamin sitting at home all nice and secure? Why? Because he's daddy's favorite now. But then again, hey, Reuben, you know what? We're kind of a problem with that because now we've made him super special. By getting rid of the other brother, we've made him even more spoiled. So, yeah, there's a whole lot of things. So what I'm saying is, as we see the crescendo, is this conversation cannot stop about Joseph all the way down there. And as they build up to this, it's going to come to that point when this final revelation is about who he is becomes emotional, the way it's going to happen. But he keeps hammering back. They say, we're here for food. He keeps saying, no, you're not. Because that's the most frightening thought, to be accused as an enemy spy. That's a death sentence. And so he's pushing on them. No, you're not. And then they give, and we'll stop with this right here, but this is where then they kind of confess, and this is where Jacob gets mad later, doesn't he? He gets mad because they told him about Benjamin. But they don't understand. Joseph manipulated this conversation to pull that out, and then he used it against them, when later Jacob's going to go, well, why'd you tell him that you have a brother? Well, we didn't know he was going to use it against us, Reuben says. When he gets home, he's like, we didn't know he was going to use this against us. We were trying to be honest with him. So, so he goes, your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more. Oh, man. Oh, you could just, all those years, Joseph just sitting there listening. So my little brother is at home. Okay, at least he's alive. You didn't kill him. And you just discarded my memory. And one's no more. So we'll go ahead and stop there, because this is a great moral value, great moral lesson for us to remember. Let's go ahead and close with a prayer. I forgot to start with one. Our most blessed Father, thank you ever so much for this beautiful story that we can look at, and how harsh that life can be, and the dynamics of human relationships. And yet we see throughout that the amazingness of you fulfilling your promises. And in that, even in the chaos that seems to prevail around these individuals, the beauty of people still receiving your blessings. And we glorify you for that, Father. And I hope, Father, that we as well today will look around, and even though we may see chaos and problems, that we can understand that there's still many things that we're being blessed for as you continue to fulfill your promise and your plan. And we thank you, Father, and we hope we'll glorify you. And we ask all this in Jesus Christ's most holy name. Amen. We hope to see you Sunday morning, 9:45, Bible study, and then 10:45 for worship. God bless.